Welcome back. Now, an election delayed is accountability denied, and this is according to the One South Africa movement. The movement statement stems from a report commissioned by the Independent Electoral Commission. An inquiry found that local government elections will not be free and fair if they are held in October. Now, it's further proposing that they be moved to next year. So let's get more on this with One SA Movement's chief activist, that's Mr. Mmusi Maimane. Mr. Maimane, thank you for your time. Always a pleasure talking to you. Quite a very heavy, statement there you've released around, accountability and that, this decision, if taken by the Independent Electoral Commission, perhaps might just give an opportunity to those alleged and accused of corruption and looting to continue to do so. Take me through that statement.
Yeah. Good morning, and good morning to fellow South Africans. No one can deny the fact that local government is in a very dire state. We cannot deny the fact that, as the Auditor General has already reported, the fact that most municipalities face the difficulties of looting and there's maladministration on the table. And therefore, given the state of a pandemic, given the fact that South Africans need to hold this government accountable for the actions that they've taken, I think to delay elections is to delay that accountability. I recognize the fact that we are living in a serious pandemic, and therefore a 4 months postponement isn't going to change materially all of those factors. We are going to go to an election under COVID, and therefore the question now becomes, how do we get there quickly and effectively, should the IEC choose to go that route, and make sure we're going to operationalize elections in a safe COVID environment. And therefore, I just maintain that it's absolutely crucial that we hold those at local government who have looted and destroyed the resources of our people accountable as soon as possible.
Do you think the IEC neglected, prioritizing being better prepared for the elections under this lockdown, under this pandemic? Do you think perhaps that they did the best that they could to prepare? However, it's just the report by the Deputy Chief Justice, Tumelo Mothotoane, which just then put all their plans in a spanner.
I respect the opinion given by Justice Mothotoane. I want to acknowledge the fact that, as to your point, the IEC has not done enough to prepare for these elections. If you look at registration weekends, if you look at the fact that they've had to go to court to request for postponement, it was almost as though COVID has caught them by surprise in this year. I could accept it for last year. But given that this year was always going to be an election year, I think the IEC should have procured more facilities for voting to take place. The IEC should have ensured that actually more COVID protocols are followed. And ultimately, the partnership with political parties should have been enhanced to ensure that political campaigning can take place in a safe manner in this time. It's not that to campaign is only a question of holding a rally, etc. But like we send our kids to school, like we make sure other sectors of society are open, we need, under these COVID conditions, we needed to ensure that political parties also operate in the same manner. But given the postponement now is going to be a question of giving the IEC an opportunity to be able to enhance those protocols so that elections are properly held. And one of the proposals we even made to Justice Mothotoane is that the elections need not only be held on one day, they can be held over 3 days, so as to avoid crowding of citizens at polling stations, and you can stagger them out on the Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of the election date, whenever that would be. So this is an urgent moment for South Africa, for us to prepare for an election and effect that accountability, given the state of what our local government is at.
Yeah. What is your sort of personal, preference or, statement in this regard? I mean, I'm just thinking about your statement earlier about, accountability, or the election, and election delayed is accountability denied. Would you rather have the election right now, done as soon as possible, make sure the IEC's house is in order so that we do have a free and fair election? Or do you support the report that we should stick to next year, so that we stick to the whole point of, Constitution allowing for democracy, to see voters having a free and fair election? Where do you stand with this?
Look, we stood and argued the case that elections needed to go ahead in October, and we needed to have them held even in this current year for the purposes of the Constitution, but also that we needed to have them done in a free and fair manner.
Right.
Now, given what Justice Mothotoane and the scientists have said, We will not oppose the action for 4 months. But again, I want to stress that this can only be the one and only postponement that takes place. And ultimately, we need to ensure that the elections proceed, because otherwise, if you keep doing that, another government could potentially find new conditions to which they would seek a similar postponement for another election at another time. So accountability is vital. To me, I am disappointed because I really believe that half the challenges that we are facing in this country are purely as a function of a poor governance. And if the Auditor General can affirm that 89% of municipalities in this country are relatively dysfunctional, of which the majority are led by this government, I think that to delay elections further and further would really be a failure to hold those public officials accountable.
Yeah, and I'm sure, the IEC should be listening to this conversation, because we had the chairperson, Mr. Glenn Mashinini, speaking earlier on. And I mean, my colleague Gareth pointing that the pandemic, unfortunately, is probably part of the reason why we're even having this conversation around a possible postponement of the elections. Bearing in mind that, hypothetically speaking, the pandemic doesn't go away, we're still in a third wave, we don't want a fourth wave, should that be imminent, would you support the IEC, further postponing from February being the given time frame in which, according to the report by Justice Moseneke, at least elections need to be conducted by then? Should there be a potential fourth wave looming and threatening this country, would you support another postponement?
I would not support it at all. And for the basic reason that it is possible to hold elections free and fair in a safe manner. Now, let me say one parallel example. Let's assume the United States of America, which was led at the time by President Trump, said, given the pandemic, we're going to delay the elections even further. Whether you're a supporter or an opponent of President Trump, at the end of the day, you needed to go express either support or disappointment in them. And it was, as the case now proves, that they've been able to accelerate vaccine rollouts under a new administration. Local government needs a refresh, and it needs one soon. And so our only question, like we saw in Malawi, like we saw in Uganda, they held elections right under COVID restrictions, did so safely, made every possible arrangement that could be utilized to ensure that elections proceed. So we have to learn from our international best practice and say South Africa, in this instance, to uphold its constitutional obligations and to hold a free and fair elections are not things that are impossible within a COVID environment.
All right, we'll leave it there. And thank you so much for talking to us. One South Africa Movement Chief Activist, Mr. Mmusi Maimane.